Hey there. So, true story, I recorded a 35-minute video and the microphone wasn't working. So, I seem to have these mishaps quite a lot, but here I am. I'm going to try and do it again. So, I'm going to do like a DVD commentary of a really boring DVD. Here is Macedonia, old infiltration map. Oh, isn't it nice? Long distance, snipey stuff. Look at the mountains, mountainous setting. And a dense forest boundary, which you can get away with those sort of textures and that sort of game. But these days, got to do a bit harder. Got to try a bit harder. I am no good at this commentary. So, yeah, let's make a dense forest boundary in Unreal. And I'm going to just skip past bits where I can't remember what I was saying or where I was clearly just rambling, which to be fair is most of it. But yeah, what a game, what a game. Zip, zip, zip. Here we are back in Unreal Engine. Always a pleasure, never a chore. So this is a first pass at a dense forest boundary where I have a billboard, a sort of 2D texture with some foliage put in front of it. On here I'm talking about a new foliage system I'm trying out which uses distance field, ambient occlusion, which looks very nice, but the lighting's not good yet. I haven't quite cracked that yet. And it's nice because it's static lit, but the shadows move when the foliage moves. Isn't that wonderful? I'll do another video on that at some point. But here we are. Here's my forest boundary. So the foliage breaks up the texture, masks it, but the texture is definitely there. This one, and the point of that stuff there is to create shadows, because when you're using billboard textures, it lights the bits between the textures and you don't want that. And simple spline mesh thing. The problem with this is the lack of undergrowth. It's too flat, it's too empty. What I need is a good bit of efficient undergrowth to put in my maps. That's the problem I have, and I don't have it. So if you've found any that works well, that won't kill performance, do let me know. Those are all Speedtrees, those are pretty inefficient, but nice enough. But moving to this distance field thing killed my lighting again. I had nicer foliage lighting. I don't anymore. Anyway, I'm saying something there. Can't remember what it was. Must be quite interesting. Yeah. So I found that I didn't need quite such a long tree line, so I'm going to redo it, excitingly, and that's my standard backdrop. Very simple texture. But I'm going to try and make a better billboard with some of the physics parameters like roughness baked into it. And there's a way to do that in Unreal Engine, mostly by hacking it a bit. Yes, spline mesh, you can move spline meshes. Nothing special about spline meshes. Okay, and here's a separate mesh I created in a straight line for my tree line. The other one was a quarter panorama, but it's not great. And let's go to the level where we make the tree line. Slowly. So I turned off my microphone again. I'm such an amateur and it's so annoying. Anyway, regular level cube with the foliage placed on it, and you'd think like third time in a row doing the spiel I'd have a clue what I'm talking about. Anyway, foliage placed like normal. There it is from above, random foliage. And what I want to do, yeah, mixture of birch, spruce, saplings, whatever, get on with it. And I use a perspective view on it, not an isometric view, because the perspective view has better lighting and I can't quite figure out how to get the same lighting in the true isometric view. So what I do is I narrow down the field of view so it's sort of more telescoped in, which flattens the perspective. And that is the tree line that I used before. And what I want to do is to zoom into half of it so I get better resolution vertically and horizontally. And I'm just going to do that by chopping off bits and resaving as a different level. And so with that done, I have my smaller stretch of trees and I line it up with the background. The background is dark green to avoid having discontinuities at the edge of the tree line, because if you have a white background or something where the pixels blend together at the edge of the tree, you get light pixels that do not look good, and you'll see this is used later on. The simple material, just an emissive green with no variation in lighting. It's unlit material. I'll be capturing different buffers to help reassemble this. So it's very difficult to get an alpha mask from that, but in the other buffer visualizations I should be able to obtain one. So I'm saying something there, same thing about the outlines, yeah, whatever. Field of view going down a bit, so we'll zoom in even more. Now the lighting is terrible, it's too dark, I will be adjusting that later. And yeah, just moving in, getting it lined up. So F11 goes to full screen. You want that. G switches to game mode. Oh, it's called immersive view, that F11 thing. Game mode gets rid of all the buttons and things and just gets rid of stuff you don't need. I need to line it up a bit, I need to go down to get that fake isometric view straight on, and then I can start capturing. And it's important not to move the camera between captures, otherwise the images won't register. I think there may be some wind, and the wind may cause small problems, but so far I've ignored that and it's worked out sort of okay. One important thing, turn off temporal anti-aliasing. It will not work. When you capture the screenshot using the high-res screenshot feature, it oversamples the thing. If you use temporal anti-aliasing, it just looks rubbish. It doesn't work. So it needs FXAA to work. So I'm lining it up, making sure it's all optimized. This is me showing you the back view that it just doesn't look very good. So you need to really go in the perspective view. Maybe you can change something to make that work better, but I couldn't find it after a little bit of looking. So here we go, perspective view, squished perspective with a very narrow field of view, and the high-res screenshot. So go for quite a large one and then scale it down, 4 times in this case. And it saves it to a particular place where we'll go and find it. Maybe we'll do all the screenshots first. So here we go. Or maybe we won't. Yeah, and now we choose a different buffer. We choose, what do we choose? Roughness in this case. So you can see some of the trees have a variation in roughness, some don't. That may be a mistake on my part or their part. But that'll give it a bit of variation. And that's the kind of thing that will lift it a bit above your standard billboard. And there's other things you can do with it, but there we go. I'm just taking that screenshot. Moving on to my favourite view, the world normals. Now, that roughness one, the way it just comes out, you can use that to generate the alpha, because the background is entirely black and anything else is not black. And that's the normal map. So there we go. And I'm just going to load this into Photoshop and process them in various ways. There's the diffuse, there's the roughness. Sorry, there's the roughness. That was an old one before. And blah blah blah. Yes, make it an alpha. So to do that, what am I doing here? I'm duplicating it, and I'm going to apply a threshold, which basically gets you pretty much a mask. There's lots of bits in it, and so you might want to fill in those bits. They look a bit distracting. So to fill it in a little bit, I'll just blur it by a pixel and then apply another threshold. There's better ways to do it, but that fills in some of the gaps. And that's my alpha, which I try to use in various ways. I have a problem importing files from Photoshop with this as the alpha in my diffuse. Don't know why, it works for other things. I must be doing something stupid. I have checked color depth and grayscale RGB. It just doesn't like diffuse RGB with an alpha channel generated by this method, by the way I do it. There's the normal. So don't crop any of them yet. What I'm doing is merging them together, and then I'll crop the whole lot. And you'll then see it come together. So that's everything in one place. And I'm going to go for a fairly big resolution, 4K by 2K, 4096 by 2048. And you can always scale it down in the engine if it's too big. But that's not huge. It's not huge, just a bit bigger than a 2K texture. And there we go. And I set the wrong resolution. 4096 by 1024. That's what I want. And then just position that, and then carefully sort of wiggle it to make sure you get it going as far to the edge as you can, because you want to minimize the amount of non-opaque texture in a masked texture. That's what kills the performance. Just doing a bit of fine adjustment. And then we crop. And there you go, all the layers. I now piss about making separate files for all these things. It's fairly straightforward. I'll just speed that bit up. Here I'm making the alpha channel, so I'm just copying the thresholded version of the roughness, making a new alpha channel, sticking it in there, bish bash bosh, job done. So if this is for the diffuse layer, deleting the layers I don't need, so we have the diffuse texture and the alpha channel. There you go. That's how it should be. This normally works. For some reason it does not work when I do it with this method. I'm probably missing something obvious, but there we go. If you know what it is I'm doing wrong, let me know. The alternative way to do it is to do a layer mask, which I'm showing here, but that is not good. So just undoing the alpha channel. Doing a layer mask, and I fanny around trying to get the method, is no good because it loses the color information where the layer is masked. So Unreal fills it in with white. So you're back to the problem of the masked stuff looks terrible. So here I am just trying to figure out how to do it. But I'll speed it up. Long story short, do alpha channel, not layer mask. Okay? Here I am contemplating the normal map, thinking that shouldn't be black, that should be the blue you get for a flat normal map, and really it should ideally. I then try and figure out what shade of blue it should be exactly, because it seems to differ from source files and what actually is displayed in Unreal Engine, and I decide that maybe I won't touch it because it seems to work after all, because the bits that are black are masked out, and there may be some problems with that, but that's basically the gist of it. And we go back into the main map to try this out. So reset the field of view, quite important that, and yeah, blah 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 blah. Don't know why that landscape's doing that. That's an artifact of this funny new way of lighting. Got to solve that somehow. And going to import all the stuff, and then I'm going to make some models. So I'll just skip through that. So let's make a material for our tree line. Just copying the one I've used before. I'll have a little look at it. Just got to plug in the new textures into it, and we have a new texture relative to the last tree line that I've now got the roughness, which I'm just finding there. And I'm going to just drag and drop it. It's easier with two monitors. So just simply going to plug in the roughness. This is a really terribly optimized set of textures, but you may recall the problem with the alpha texture not merging with the diffuse texture very nicely means it has to be a separate texture. So I'm just putting in the new versions, and don't know what I'm doing there. Anyway, we'll come back to the finished material. Okay, what I forgot to do was to brighten the texture. So I'm making an adjustment layer, to allow it to be more easily adjusted later in a non-destructive way. And I'm just brightening it up and putting in a bit of fill shadow, enough to make it visible but not so much it looks stupid. And just going to re-import that, and that's then ready. So in that comes, and that essentially completes the material, which is a masked material, and it can be tweaked in various further ways that are useful. And let's just test it in game. So a simple mesh with the old tree line. Lighting doesn't work for some reason, might need to be built. And let's pop the new material in, just to have a look. Squished, so let's just correct the aspect ratio. And that's looking a little better than the old tree line. But it's not sufficient, because you can see, well, it's not built, but there'll be no shadows behind it, so it will completely destroy the illusion of being a dense forest. So we're going to have to do something about that. So we go to the modeler, that's the mesh for the old tree line, and we're going to have to do something a bit different. So first of all, let's load in the new texture, and then we'll make a multi-layered tree line in this with some extra bits to cast shadows where we want them. So I'm just shrinking it down, getting it more or less right, more or less. And then what I want to do is to curve round the mesh. I want it to curve back at the ends, which is the most important thing, so it's easier to merge with other meshes of the same type, because if you put them together the ends just disappear off, and also it stops you seeing behind the trees, so that helps too. And I'm going to span around a bit until I've got the shape right. I'll come back when I have. And now to the UVs, which I mapped with foresight before I squished it around, so they're all linearly mapped to each segment. I don't propose to change that, but I'm going to need to modify the light map. The light map and texture map look the same at the moment, but when I've finished making new bits, I'll have to modify that. Let's just see it in game. So I've modified the existing tree line because I forgot to save it as the right thing. Anyway, so that is the new tree line, and it's alright, depending on where you put it and what you expect from it. But from a distance that might well work. But we want to make a combined structure that has the shadowing as necessary. So what I'm going to do is basically quite simple, quite hacky. Just copy it, flip it, and then create something in the middle. So I'll just speed up that. Now this is something that sometimes works, sometimes doesn't, but I'm just selecting all the points and making a polygon, and to my surprise it did make a nice proper polygon. I've cut and pasted it so it's disconnected, moved it down, and it's only shadowing, so that's shadowing downwards. That that shape should never be seen. Oh, it is a polygon. So it should cast shadow below. Doesn't matter what it looks like on top, but I am going to use the same texture so that if the light build is doing its job very well, it will let the sunlight through in patches where that texture has holes in the mask. So that's the basic plan. Then I repeat it a couple of times so it's nice and shadowed. And now the light map. So I am manually sorting this out so that I'm avoiding any overlaps Within the Lightmap, standard procedure. Just doing that quite quickly. For those sheets, it's quite important to have the Lightmap okay. For the rest of it, could be whatever you want, because it's not going to be seen. So goes the theory. These are one-sided materials, ideally. If they were two-sided, well, best to have one-sided and have then, if you need a second side, just to copy it and make a separate entry in the Lightmap, I find. Unless it's a foliage material, blah blah blah, but it's not. Oh, I suppose I could make that a foliage material and let the light come through. Yeah, thought for another time. But I'm just building the Lightmap. I'm then going to add another bit behind it. I'm going to zoom forward to that. Well, first here's the imported mesh. Just has one material, which is that one. Stick it in, and there is your thing. And I'm going to move those shapes down so they're just a bit lower down for obvious reasons. And just here is a look at the shadow. So it's now pretty solidly shadowed with a few little gaps, and that's really what I wanted. And that helps it avoid looking incongruous. And here's adding another bit at the back just to create more shadow. I might even stretch that out a bit more so that it's really shadowed. I need to fix up the Lightmap, and then that is in game, so I'm going to fast forward to that. And there is the sort of finished product. It's floating above the air, floating above the ground because the landscape drops off, but that can be fixed. So it does need a flat surface. But see, that's quite a nice shadow effect, and you can believe that's dense forest. And when there's trees in front of it, the effect should be a little more convincing than the current effect. And as you move along, you know, a bit of a parallax sort of scroller element. But you can see it's not a pure 2D shape. So you want it to look good as it is, but also good as you're moving around it. And I'll just pop it in and see if I can make it work with the existing foliage that I've put in. And then we'll see how it looks. Just need to rescale it a tiny bit, reposition. And you can do things like make the back layers smaller, but maybe a bit higher so that you can still see them, so you get the effect of the trees fading off. But yeah, from a distance that should be all right, I think. So yeah, I'm quite happy with that. That sort of dense, forbidding, dark forest is the effect I'm going for, and just need enough foliage to break it up, and I need some better undergrowth to make the transition more plausible, and also to hide the bottoms of the trees. But as a billboard type effect, not bad, I think, not bad. And you can see there with the roughness map rather, and the normals, you get a slightly more interesting effect. But it won't, of course, stand up to scrutiny. But you can get fairly close before you start to notice the resolution and the lack of 3D-ness. The lighting will continue to be a problem, but overall, there we go. I think job done. Oh, and that's just saying the atmospheric fog affects the background, which is actually quite far away in the editor, far enough away to be affected by fog. There we go. Bye bye.